We're going to give everyone a moment to get settled, and we'll start in just a minute.
Sounds good. Hi, Michael.
All right. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge the indigenous land on which TAO is headquartered. The Portland Metro is an area that rests on traditional village sites of Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use plentiful natural resources of the area. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. Now, hello everyone. Welcome to our first I Am Tech Oregon interview of the week, sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. First Tech is more than just a bank. First Tech is a member-owned financial institution that's powered by a people before profit philosophy. They invest in their member family with personalized financial services and convenient banking solutions to help you thrive. I am Justin Martinez. I go by he, him pronouns, and am TAO's event and program coordinator. I am also joined by Kara Snow, Chief Community Engagement Officer, who's providing back-end Zoom support. Before we get started, all participants have been muted upon entry. Please stay on mute unless a TAO staff member unmutes you and calls on you to talk. You may ask questions. You may respond or ask questions in the chat box publicly or privately by directing your message to me or Kara, and we'll continue to monitor the chat box. We also ask you to engage by the participant icon on your screen. We have allotted for time for audience Q&A via Mentimeter. You can access the Q&A by scanning the QR code on the screen or by visiting menti.com and using the voting code 6116362. We will share these access details when we reach that portion of today's interview. Please engage with us on social media during this call and throughout the day. We love to share what's happening at TAO and to get participation takeaways from our events. Now, without any further ado, the reason we're all here, it is my pleasure to have Tony Seminary, founder and CEO of IT Motives, with us today. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, as we already mentioned, you're the CEO and founder of IT Motives. For audience members who may not be aware, can you share your career journey and how you arrived where you are today?
Sure. IT Motives is a recruiting company locally here in the Portland metro area. And what's interesting is if you ask most folks in recruiting, they stumble into it. There's not like a degree where you go and get a 4-year degree in recruiting or things of that nature. So I went to the U of O, go Ducks, and I got my 4-year degree in 5 years, I always jokingly say. And when I got out of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I was thinking maybe a teacher, because I did study sociology, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I went to the Career Center at U of O, and they connected me with a bunch of companies that were looking to hire entry-level college grads. And one of the companies was a recruiting company that was very large and based in Baltimore, Maryland. And they ended up hiring me, and they made me an offer and they hired me. And that's kind of how I got into recruiting. I was entry level, didn't have any experience in it. And frankly, I wasn't sure what I was really going to be doing. They were kind of secretive in their interview, which was fine. But they told me that you would be building relationships with people. You'd be calling them on the phone, taking them out for coffee and lunch. And being a people person, I'm like, sure, I can do all of that, no problem. And it kind of got me to where I'm at today. 12 years ago in July, I started IT Motives. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. And I've just been going for, I guess, 24 years now in the Portland tech market in recruiting. And it's a passion of mine. That's how I broke into the business, really.
Awesome. We've been having a lot of conversations kind of centered around representation and what that means and seeing yourself in different industries. As you were entering this tech industry and the workforce for that matter, did you see yourself represented among your peers or leadership?
Are you talking from the Native American perspective?
Sure, or however you would identify yourself. Did you see yourself generally represented?
Well, what's interesting is no, I did not, but I also know that I look very, very Caucasian, and I understand that. I am Native American. I'm very proud of it. We're a Native American owned company. I don't think there's too many recruiting companies that are like ours, so to speak. And when I look around a room, I see a lot of people that from the skin, the container perspective, definitely look like me, right? And they may not even know that I'm Native, and I understand that. I understand the reasons why. As far as being represented, definitely not with Native Americans, and not a ton of folks from small town America. I'm from a small town of 1,000 people. The town is called Siletz. It's home to me. I don't live there anymore, but it's still my home. And there's not a lot of folks that are from towns like that that I worked with necessarily. It felt like a lot of folks were from up here, maybe bigger city, and that's okay, because I love to represent the small town and what the small town kind of embodies in the workforce. And to me, those are things such as work ethic, and you say you're going to do something, you do it. It's interesting in the world that we're in, you have to sign contracts with people. Where I come from, you say what you're going to do and you're going to do it. There doesn't need to be a contract necessarily. I understand the reasons why, and I get all of that, but it's a little bit different, if you will, from where maybe I grew up and how maybe things were, maybe how just the perspective that I have from where I grew up. But it's interesting. I think there is, I think with obviously the rise of the internet, it's really leveled the playing field. And now I think you'll probably start to see with this global pandemic, more folks from smaller town America that don't necessarily need to move from their small towns, that can maybe create a business that they can stay where they're comfortable at, live there, and still make a really nice living, where they don't have to uproot themselves and move away from where they grew up necessarily.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great insight. You mentioned earlier that oftentimes, or you've heard or have seen that people kind of fall into recruiting. Um, and my question was going to be what originally got you interested in it, but I'm more curious, what got you interested in staying in it? What drove you to just stay in that particular field of the tech industry?
I don't know back then if I knew. I do know now. I guess for me, it was, I love people. And about maybe within the last year, I had a couple of my close friends ask me a very simple question that I'm asking people now, which is, what is your why? And besides like providing for your family and putting a roof over your head and food on the table, besides that, what gets you out of bed every day and makes you want to go to work? For me, one of the whys is building long-term lasting relationships with folks. And that's what I get every single day at IT Motives. And it's how I am personally as well. So it's both. And that's one of the benefits of working in the industry that I'm working in.
Yeah, that's lovely. I would imagine that's thrilling to go to work to every day. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you about imposter syndrome too, being that you're the founder and CEO of your company. Did you wrestle with that at all? Do you continue to wrestle with that?
Yes and yes. I don't think there's probably too many people out there that don't have it. That would just be a guess. And number one, when you start a brand new career like I did years ago, you're having imposter syndrome. I mean, they put us into a pretty immersive, intense training, and you're surrounded by your peers. After that 2-week training, you go back to the home office and it's still very, very hands-on and very immersive, but you're faking it until you're making it, really. I mean, there's no question about it. And I think fast forward to years ago, 12 years ago, and starting IT Motives, without question, it's like, I still sometimes think, who am I to be running a company, right? I'm this kid from small town America, 1,000 people. How did that happen? And people are actually entrusting themselves in me and my company. And I've never had anybody in my family that started a company. So I didn't have like a pedigree. I didn't have like family members that I could call on and say, hey, I know you've went through this. You've started a company and you've been through the trials and tribulations. What's it like? And what's my next kind of milestone? And then once I get there, what's my next one after that? It's definitely imposter syndrome. And as I continue to grow this business 12 years later, and as I climb new mountains and climb and continue to try to climb this mountain, so to speak, I still have it because I'm learning all the time. So I think imposter syndrome is, I would guess, probably pretty normal, but I'm not afraid to admit it. I definitely had it, and I still have it from time to time.
Yeah, I feel like if you don't have it at some point, you're not still learning. You're not growing or expanding, which is really unique. Do you have any like words of wisdom or something you would have said to yourself back when you were first starting the company that would help push you further along or faster or?
Well, one thing I do, and I still to this day do, is I get a lot of mentorship. I surround myself with people, whether it's coaches, people that I've been introduced to in the industry that have been through that I'm trying to go through. And I think just really asking for help. I know that's hard sometimes because you want to feel like you know all the answers, but you don't and you won't. And asking for help, surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, and really just kind of, being okay to have some failures and learn from them, embrace the failures, and take what you can from those and continue on. Don't let them define you. But I think getting mentors is really important. One of the first things I did, Justin, was when before I even started IT Motives, the Small Business Administration has an office called SCORE. And I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but essentially it's a bunch of folks that work at the SCORE office that are there to help new and small business owners. And so I went to the SCORE office, befriended a guy named Bill Witten. Bill's great, love Bill to death. And he was just someone that the two of us had a great connection. and he helped me a lot with kind of the beginning part of my journey of IT Motives. And he still is helping me to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I stepped into my current role from hospitality, so it's quite different than what I used to do. And I've been struggling learning that there's a lot of power and educational opportunities in being vulnerable and saying, I don't know, and trying to find those people around you to support you. And then you have that support network, which is really exciting. That's great.
Absolutely. And I think if you're asking for help, there's a psychology around that, right? You're going to a person and saying, I don't know something. I know that you know it. Can you help me? And you tell them essentially, I respect you so much that I'm willing to be vulnerable to you, but I'm also understanding that you can help me with this. So who wouldn't feel good about that? Now, unless the person just simply doesn't have the time, which is possible,
Yeah.
chances are they're going to feel compelled to help you, right? So
Yeah.
I think it makes them feel respected as well because you're asking them for that help.
Yeah, and you're making a genuine connection, which is kind of what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
I think you've touched on it a couple of times so far that you really like the deep and lasting connections that you're making with individuals. I would imagine that has been your favorite thing about your career. Are there any other like key bullet points that you particularly love about what you do?
Yeah, I think growing people, not just myself, because when I'm growing others, I'm growing as well. I really enjoy that. And I think, it's again, it goes back to those relationships. Some of these folks have become my friends, and we do things maybe on the weekends, and but it's creating depth, and it's creating like real connection with people. That's what really fuels me every single day to come to work.
That's lovely. That's why I like coming to work. I like my team and everyone I get to talk to every day. Um, so coming up through your career, what would you say are the top two best career decisions you ever made to get to where you are now?
Well, starting this company, I guess that would be one of them. I think looking back, I was working at a company for almost 10 years, and they decided to close our Lake Oswego branch, which I was working out of. And at the time, I was devastated, right? I'd worked with these colleagues. I worked for this, they were really, really good company. And they just decided they didn't want to continue to support our branch. And looking back on it, I understood. But at the time, I was devastated. And I think the best thing I did is going into business for myself. Now I've eventually created a team, and we're a lot bigger than we were 12 years ago. It's just me, but back then. But I think that's one of the best things I did, just kind of push myself into entrepreneurship. I think that y'all ought to try it at least once in your life, just to give it a go. Take 2 years maybe, if you can, if you got that kind of runway, and really see what it's like to be a business owner. What's interesting is perspective, right? Some of the decisions that I look back on that my former company had made that always kind of left me scratching my head. Now that I'm a business owner, I look at some of those decisions and I'm like, wasn't too bad. They knew what they were doing, right? At the time, I was questioning it, being this young hotshot recruiter, thinking I, had all the answers, but it definitely gives you a little dose of humility too.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know until it's there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, what would you say is the worst career decision you ever made?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, Justin, and I still wasn't really prepared because I was thinking about it. I guess years ago when probably my very first boss came to me and said, Tony, we're ready to promote you. You're a recruiter right now. We want you to go into account management. And I was so scared. And we went to lunch. I'll never forget the feeling from that lunch. Takes me out to lunch. He says, I think you're ready to go to the next level. And I said, I don't think I'm ready. And the disappointment in his face, I just never, ever forgot that. And I understand now why people don't turn down their bosses when they get asked for a promotion. It's a really hard thing to do. And it would have been probably the best thing to do at the time, even though I wasn't ready, because eventually 6 months later, I had the same conversation. I said, yeah, I'm ready now. So I got the promotion. But probably the reason it was such a bad career decision is I got moved to a different office and I got moved away from some of the people that I would have worked with, and maybe I would have probably been working with long after I got the promotion. Once I got the promotion, not long after, we moved the offices, and then it was kind of all downhill for me there at that company. That was probably the worst career decision.
Yeah, the reason I like this question, because to me, I think about it myself, like what's the worst decision I ever made? And I find it difficult to pinpoint because I try to look at it from the perspective of, well, was it that bad? Because I learned something from it, and I feel like as long as you walk away with it, with that perspective and learning and growing, is it really the worst decision? But
I got another one. So along the same lines, that company, it was my first job out of college. I worked there about 2 years. And my parents always told me about this. They said, whatever you do, son, don't ever quit one job without going to another. Makes sense, right? I mean, just that's like, you know, corporate America 101.
yeah.
And of course, I did the absolute opposite of what they told me. I was there for 2 years. I remember they decided they want to make a change and change my job title and this, that, and the other thing. And I looked at my boss at the time and I said, I can't do it. He goes, well, that's the only option. I said, then today is my last day. And that was probably another bad career decision. As a person that helps employ people out there, you'll hear this a lot. You're always more employable when you're employed. So probably another bad career move on my part.
Yeah, I opened 2 hotels in downtown Portland back to back, which is a big project. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours, and I just got burnt out after the second one and ended up resigning because I just needed time. And then a week later, TAO reached out and it's like, oh, well, this is strangely serendipitous. So
Yeah.
great. So it all
Yeah.
worked out, but yeah, it could have been worse. It could have not gone well.
Good for you on that. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse. I think I was out for about 6 to 8 weeks without work. And back then I was definitely living paycheck to paycheck. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it was
scary.
kind of rough. Yeah.
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 So we have one more question before we go into audience Q&A. How would your 10-year-old self react to what you do now?
I love the question. My 10-year-old self would say, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. The only other thing that I could think of is maybe being a motivational speaker, Justin, something like that. One day, maybe I'll go out on the circuit and talk. But my 10-year-old self, what would that be? About 4th grade, maybe. I always had a large circle of friends. That's just who I was and who I am to this day. So my 10-year-old self back then would say, this is what you need to be doing and continue to keep doing it because you have this large network and you enjoy people and you enjoy getting to know folks. 10-year-old self would definitely approve.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I mean, I could listen to you all day. So when you get that motivational speaker itch, let TAO know. We have lots of communities for you to chat with.
Sure.
All right, everyone. In front of your screen, you'll see a QR code that you can scan that'll open up the Mentimeter application where you can submit questions for Tony. You can also go to menti.com and type in the voting code 6116362. I'm going to switch over to our other platform, which is Mentimeter, and I'll throw that access back up on the screen too.
By the way, I want to give a shout out. I've been drinking out of my coffee cup, if you can see that. We always try to help small businesses, says coffee should be dope. And then you got the dead stock coffee. You can maybe see that.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Give a shout out to Ian and his people over there.
Okay, everyone. Again, you can go to menti.com.
Hey, I'm on the line here. This is Stephen Oakes. I'm calling from the Goose Cube Project. This is an amazing interview. Sorry that I just had to jump on, but I did have one question for you. When you're in a personal meeting with someone where you're making a connection, what's one thing that you do to help really deepen that connection?
It's a great question, Stephen. Well, ask them about their story, kind of like what Justin did with me. I think people want to talk about themselves, and I think that's the number one thing I would say.
Yeah, you learn a lot about somebody, and if you don't ask, you don't know.
Yep.
So we do have another question submitted. Tony, what do you see as the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity coming out of the pandemic, since we should all do the business thing once?
Ooh. Huh. Gosh, that's a really good question. I don't have a great answer. I don't know if you need to necessarily reinvent the wheel. Just what I would suggest is this: if you want to be an entrepreneur, first and foremost, get into a business or start a business that is your passion and it's congruent with who you are. Because that'll take you through those tough days when things don't go your way. You'll be able to always kind of revert back to that passion. So that's what I would suggest. I wouldn't chase a business or an industry. I would chase your passion.
Okay, we're gonna have another one come up here in just a sec. When building out your team in the early years, what qualities did you put the most weight on? Do you have trouble attracting the talent you wanted? Or did you have trouble?
Well, it was a different interview process back then than it is now. We're a little more streamlined and formal, not overly formal, but we didn't really have a process. I think the biggest thing looking back on some of the early hires were personality and work ethic, and could I relate to them? Would I feel comfortable them being, quote, out in the field representing IT motives? I think that was probably what we looked at then. One of the things, to one of your questions, Justin, is now as we will be hiring again in 2021, is that, do you feel comfortable being able to fake it until you make it? And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek question, but it's also serious. Are you comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And you're not going to know everything. We will train you and we will ramp you up and we'll give you a lot of mentorship and all of that, but you've got to be comfortable coming into an industry where you're not going to know everything. You're just not. And it might take you a while before the light bulb comes on. I mean, it could be a year. It really could be. So I think that's something that is going to be not a focus, but it'll definitely be kind of along the lines of questions we'll be asking going forward. And then the second part was, do you have trouble, I'm just reading the question, do you have trouble attracting the talent you want? Yeah, I think the reason is because we're a small business, one, and we don't have these big marketing dollars where people know who we are. And two, people aren't aware of the industry and the opportunity in recruiting. Again, there's no 4-year degree and there's no governing body in recruiting. Justin or anybody else on this call, today you could change your LinkedIn profile and say, I'm a technical recruiter, and that's it. Nobody questions it. So I think people aren't aware of this great opportunity we have. And it's not just with IT Motives. There is a bunch of companies out there in our ecosystem and across the US that have these kind of opportunities to be a recruiter and to work in this industry. So yeah, we do have trouble just from a visibility perspective and knowing that we do have opportunities and that we will, eventually be hiring.
We have a few more questions. Thank you for sharing more about your background. What do you think the tech industry can do to support Native American youth who are interested in careers in tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the STEM, or maybe it's called STEAM now. I think internships, and not the internships we thought of like 20 years ago, right? I mean, real internships where the folks that are the interns, I would say kids, but just because you're doing an internship doesn't mean you're a teenager. You might be a 37-year-old doing an internship as a career change. So I think those kind of opportunities. And I think really, I guess you did say youth though, of course. So I think that would be probably getting it into the curriculum to make youth, and especially Native youth, aware of those opportunities where you don't have to necessarily maybe even leave the reservation to have a career in technology. The Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indians out in Pendleton, a lot of people don't know this, but they have like a software dev and QA center that is a partnership with Accenture, right? And they have probably 200 to 300 employees that work in Pendleton at their dev and QA center. So, the youth out there, if they want to get into tech, they don't have to actually leave their communities, which is huge in the Native world. That's a big, big deal to be able to ideally stay close to home or at home.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Okay, our next question. Do you have any learnings you can share about building the culture you want at your company?
Well, be intentional. Be very intentional. And I think letting folks know what the culture is and what, let's say, the core values are, and talking about, as I said earlier, the why, and then repeating that, right? Hiring people that have and match up to those core values. We haven't had this at IT Motives, but if you're having an issue with your culture, your core values and maybe your mission, we have them listed here in the office, mission, vision, value statements, any issues that you have, I believe you go back to those core values and the mission, vision, value, and those are what drive your culture. That's what you hold people accountable to as they work at your company. And as you continue to develop that, you have to be consistent as well, especially as a leader. Like you have to do it, walk it as well. Like if you want someone that is strong integrity, well, you better have strong integrity first and foremost, right? You need to set the example as the owner, the founder, the coach, whatever you want to call yourself. So it starts with you, but then it also is something that you talk about a lot, your, what they call maybe your core ideologies.
Yeah, that's great. And I have one more question. I help mentor new graduates from computer science colleges. They're frustrated because so many job descriptions ask for experience. What should I tell them?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a catch-22. I was there 24 years ago before I got into recruiting. It's like I've got all of this like passion and drive and all those other intangibles, but I don't have anything on my resume. How do I bridge that gap, essentially, is what you're asking for the folks that you mentor. Well, two things that we suggest, and if this is possible, especially now with this global pandemic we're in, a lot of these meetups are virtual. So the first thing I would suggest is having the computer science, the new grads with computer science degrees go to these meetups, and go to meetup.com. There's a meetup for everything, whether it's tech or otherwise. You know, I always jokingly say, if you want to, you know, study centipedes in Guatemala, there's probably a meetup for it. You know, seriously. I mean, it's like there's a topic for everything. But go to the meetup, look at what the tech meetups are, find those topics that you're interested in, and then attend those. That's the number one thing. The number two is, if you're a computer science grad or soon to be, very simply create a project that you can put like on your GitHub and your resume that is around your passion, right? We talked about passions earlier. Someone asked the question about starting a company, and you know, what should you start your company around? Your passion. Same thing when you're coding. So if you like to run half marathons, create an app for that. And then you can post it up not only on your GitHub, but also in your resume. And it's not professional experience, but what it's showing to the reader is that you're invested in your career. You're taking you're taking the time to create those opportunities for yourself. So networking and creating a project around a passion of yours. That's the two things where I would start with, and then see where that kind of takes you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. All right, everyone. We're getting close to the time. I just wanted to thank you, Tony, again, for taking the time to meet with everybody today and answer some of our questions, letting us get to know you a little bit better. Our series will continue tomorrow. We'll be speaking with Daylin Moyer, Software Engineering Manager at Lithia. It'll be the same time tomorrow morning, and reminders will go out tomorrow morning with link accesses as well. And then if you would like to connect with TAO, you can check us out on Twitter, LinkedIn, visit our events page. And then we're following the hashtag IamTechOregon to continue the series. Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, TAO. Thank you, Kara.
Thanks, Tony.